Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Moderating Forums at Your Library, Nuts and Bolts. My name is Angela Fellon, and I'm the Communications Officer with the American Library Association's Public Programs Office. I'd like to thank you for joining us for today's online learning session, which is the second session in our four-part series on convening deliberative forums. This session is presented by programminglibrarian.org, a resource website of the ALA Public Programs Office, and is presented with support from the ALA Cultural Communities Fund. Today's session is part of an ongoing initiative of the Public Programs Office under the leadership of the ALA Public and Cultural Programs Advisory Committee to present professional development opportunities for libraries that support civic engagement initiatives. The ALA Center for Civic Life has been an important partner in this effort, and I would like to commend everyone on the committee, the Center for Civic Life Advisory Committee, including all of today's speakers, for all of the amazing work that they've done to make today's webinar possible. Just a reminder that this session is part of a four-part series put together by the Center for Civic Life, so if you haven't already registered for the upcoming sessions, please be sure to do so at programminglibrarian.org. You can also find an archive recording of our first session, which was held in February. That is available at programminglibrarian.org. And while you're there, if you're interested in learning about other upcoming online learning opportunities from Programming Librarian, you can sign up for the monthly newsletter. And if you're interested in deeper engagement with library models of civic engagement, the ALA Public Programs Office is offering a day-and-a-half pre-conference at the ALA Annual Conference in Anaheim titled Civic Reflection Builds Community Connections, a Program Model for Libraries. This training will feature Adam Davis from the Project on Civic Reflection and will present an in-depth training opportunity for attendees from public, academic, special, and school libraries. For more information about that, please visit the conference website, that's alaannual.org. The Center for Civic Life will also be holding a pre-conference at the ALA Annual Conference this summer, which will provide attendees with an opportunity to participate in a deliberative forum about privacy and to learn a little bit more about moderating, which we will go over in much more detail during today's session. Before we get started, I'd like to set out some basic information about communication in our online classroom setting. Then we will move along to our presentation. If you are at any point experiencing technical difficulties, difficulty hearing or seeing the presentation, please send a private message to Angela Hanshaw. She is our resident technical support expert, and describe your problem to her. To send a private message, you can click on her name in the just under where it says hosts. You can click on her name and then select start chat with, and then describe your problem to her, and she should be able to help you. We will have a Q&A session after the main presentation. In order to keep the program on track, we ask that you save your questions for the presenters until the end, at which point you can ask your questions by typing them into the chat box. And I'm sure there will be lots of questions after today's session. And finally, if you experience technical difficulties during the session and get booted off, don't panic. The whole thing is being recorded and will be available for you to download at your leisure after the program's conclusion on programminglibrarian.org. And now it's my pleasure to introduce our first presenter, Patty Deneen, who is joining us from the National Issues Forum Institute.
Thank you, Angela, and welcome everyone. It's a pleasure to be with you today. I am Patty Deneen, and I'm located in Gibsonia, Pennsylvania, which is near Pittsburgh. I'm the first of several presenters who will be with you today, and I wanted to start by asking you a question. That we have a poll that we'd like to engage you in. This is the second webinar, so I'm asking you to select whether you were with us for webinar 1. Perhaps you weren't with us for webinar 1, but you had a chance to watch the archived recording, or you're here with us for the first time. So please click the one that applies to you. We'd appreciate the information. And wanted to remind you that this is the second of 4 webinars. They'll all be recorded, and please let your friends and colleagues know that they are welcome to join us in any of the webinars. There's no requirement to have been with us previously, so please let them know. We'd be delighted to have everyone here. Okay, thank you very much for answering our questions. And last month, we talked about getting started. Nancy Cronick talked about what a terrific fit it is with libraries, the mission of libraries, and needs of the community, why now and why libraries. I talked about what deliberation is as a particular kind of talk that's really the engine that makes forums work. And Carolyn Kaywood shared some wonderful success stories from the field, specific examples of people who have done this. So welcome to number 2. And at today's webinar, we're going to take some big picture views of the main parts of a deliberative forum, what happens at deliberative forums, the moderator's role, the recorder's role, and the note taker or observer's role. In this picture here, you see the main elements. There are people sitting in a circle. They're attending a 2-hour forum in the evening that was held here in the Squirrel Hill area of Pittsburgh. The woman in the long black dress was serving as a moderator. To her right is a person who was going to be recording on the flip chart. And actually to her right, I'm sitting in a chair, and I was serving as the note taker for that forum. So what happens at a deliberative forum? As I said, probably the typical time is 2 hours, sometimes 3 hours. The format is very flexible. Sometimes people do even a half-day session, or they may do a series of evening or afternoon forums that run over several weeks. But essentially, it's people getting together to work on a public problem they're concerned about by deliberating about the issue, and usually with the help of a neutral moderator and an issue framework that presents the overview of the issue, and then 3 or sometimes 4 approaches that are very carefully looked at with the help of the moderator. So here we have pictures of these essential elements. The moderator who stays neutral and helps keep things on track and on time and make sure that each of the approaches gets a equal consideration. An issue framework of some kind. In the picture with people sitting around a table, what looks like people reading newspapers is actually people looking at the framework that in this case was printed by a major city newspaper, which, by the way, a newspaper can make a terrific co-sponsor resource to a forum. With their resources, they can get the word out, they can print the framework, and report about it afterwards. And to the right of that is just a stack of National Issues Forums issue books. And there are other groups that are creating issue frameworks to help with deliberative forums, and we're going to, in our resources, we have a list of other places that do that. On the bottom picture on the left is a guidelines for our forums poster that I just picked up a marker and actually wrote that on a flip chart. There are some pre-printed posters that are available. In this case, we had a breakout room that didn't have a poster, so I just wrote one up myself. To the right of that, you see a recorder person writing on a flip chart and a person in the foreground, excuse me, taking notes. Sometimes there's a video accompanying some of the issue frameworks that is about 6 or 7 or 8 minutes long that gives an overview of the issue and the approaches, and it can be very helpful to set the stage for the deliberation. But first, there are what I would call some pressing questions that most of us in this work have been faced with at one time or another. Like, why bother? Is this just more talk? Or why not let the experts solve these really difficult problems? And why the particular kind of talk that we call deliberation is such a big deal. First, the why bother. There are a number of core concepts that we believe is the foundation for this work, and I've just added one here. There are several. This concept is the notion that as the public we are, or at least are supposed to be, or need to be the primary actors in our democracy. And to do that, we believe, goes beyond just a kind of direct democracy where people just make up their own individual mind and then vote and the majority rules. We believe that public deliberating together is the only way that we can make tough choices about public policy that we all have to live with. So the question of why not let the experts work on these problems? They have the expertise, they have the facts. Why not just base it all on that and let them decide, and then the rest of us will follow their direction? Well, what we've learned is that expert information and facts can tell us what can be done, but it cannot tell us what should be done, and it cannot tell us what the public's most highly valued perspectives are. So we may all share the same values, but what is most valuable at any given time can only be determined by the public. This is a vintage photo you see here, taken during the height of Prohibition, when alcohol was made illegal. Actually, it turns out that drinking alcohol was never illegal, just the production and transportation and sale of alcohol. It was a law, it was a change in the Constitution, and it turned out that it did not last because the public realized eventually that there were other kinds of values in play, other ways that the public valued the freedom and ability to have alcohol available in different ways. And so it did not stand, and even though the facts and expertise probably points to the rightness of making alcohol illegal because of the damage it does in a lot of ways, the public had other kinds of judgments about it. So why is the particular kind of talk that we call deliberation so important? Well, deliberation requires that we weigh very carefully not only our favored approach to a problem, but also even the cost, consequences, trade-offs, pros and cons of that approach, who it would be good for and who it would be bad for, so that eventually a decision is made with full knowledge of the downsides of any particular approach too. Deliberation is asking people to work harder than they would in just having a great discussion for a while. Wishful thinking, or the idea that there are perfect cost-free solutions out there somewhere if we can just find them, or find the person who has them, is easier and a lot more appealing than doing this work together ourselves. A lot of campaign talk resides in the wishful thinking. Here's the right answer, and this is what we'll do, and don't worry about the downsides of it. So deliberation isn't about finding the perfect cost-free answer. It's about working toward making a choice. It's hard work, but it is important work. It can increase the capacity in a community to solve future problems, and it increases social capital and the ability of a community to work together in many different ways. And we have found that people find this to be very meaningful and satisfying work. The picture you see there is taken from a video that was about a budgeting deliberation that was done in Chicago. It's no longer on YouTube, which is what you see there, but it is on a website, and you can go and watch. It's a very interesting description of a project that a community worked on together. So one of the things that helps when you're doing hard work or asking others to do hard work is to have good tools. And the issue framework is one of the most important tools that a moderator has to use, and the participants also. It identifies what the issue is, gives some basic facts and the essence, maybe the history of the problem, and cuts across old arguments, and presents 3, sometimes 4 approaches, gets away from that polarization of just a pro or con, and asks people to consider each approach in turn, and helps people identify what is valuable to them. So now let's take a closer look at the moderator's role. Remember, today we're a little bit more big picture, and we're going to get down to more nitty-gritty details in next month's webinar, number 3. So here to help you do that is Nancy Cronick. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Patty, and thank you, Angela. I'm going to talk to you today about the role of the forum moderator. So when you got your announcement on how to sign on today, there was also a download that you may or may not have seen. If you didn't download it, it's available to your left under Civic Engagement Handouts. It's our Center for Civic Life Public Deliberation Handbook, which is a very useful tool that has a lot more detail than I'm going to cover today. We also have a copy of it on our ALA Connect site. So one way or the other, we hope that you will take a look at our training packet. In particular, pages 4 through 16 of the packet cover the role of the moderator, which is my topic. Now, with other guides that are out there, like National Issues Forums, issue books come with moderator guides, and ALA has an issue book on privacy. These guides also give you some hints, and they can be more specific to the topic. But before I begin the specifics, I wanted to share with you how much I personally love moderating public forums. Patty talked about deliberation being hard work, and being a moderator is also hard work, but it's a real pleasure. After doing it for more than 10 years, I found it a most fascinating opportunity to really listen and learn about my community, their different viewpoints, and to think through just how do we move together to make choices. So my purpose here is to talk to you mostly about the role of the moderator. I'm going to do that in 10 simple points, and hopefully you will determine that it is not so hard to do it. And once you have a little experience, you'll find that most of this comes intuitively. So the first thing you want to do, point 1, is arrive prepared. Now that sounds obvious. But one of the ways to be prepared is to read the issue book and related materials in advance. Make sure you're familiar with what's being discussed. You do not need to, nor should you be an expert. You just need to know about what's going to be discussed. You want to introduce participants and thank your sponsors, but just as important, you want to introduce everybody else, including yourself. Who are you? Who's going to be your recorder? You might be trading off between yourself and the recorder. Who's going to take notes if you have a note taker? And you want to introduce what the forum is about and tell them that they are going to be putting on their civic hats for the evening. They're not having a debate. There's nothing to win. So you're going to present an overview. And we will provide you a step-by-step guide in the webinar 3. So I'm not going to get too specific today. But I just want to give you a sense of what your role would be if you're going to become the moderator. And the best advice I can give you is that the better prepared you are, the less likely you are to have problems. So point 2, you want to roll out the welcome mat. One of the biggest and most important things you can do is make people in the group feel welcome. That means inclusive, safe, friendly, open. You want to be courteous, fair, and even-handed. The purpose of this is to bring different voices together. So you have a diversity of viewpoints, something that we as librarians should be very comfortable with. So you want to make sure that you have balanced participation and people feel welcome. Point 3 is you're going to present guidelines. Now, Patty mentioned the guidelines previously. These are actually a picture I took of the printed guidelines, a copy that I have that are getting a little worn out, but the National Issues Forums provide some printed guidelines, or as Patty did, you can write them out yourself. What's important about presenting the guidelines is It gives everybody an opportunity to agree on what's going to happen. And just as importantly, as the moderator, it will lay out the role that you will play. So it actually states in the guidelines that as the moderator, you're going to guide the discussion but will remain neutral. And this remaining neutral is key. And you're also going to make sure that everyone else is encouraged to participate, that major choices are considered, that there's an atmosphere of discussion and analysis, and that people listen to each other, and that listening is really important. So next, I'm going to do a quick poll, and then we'll return to the presentation. So we want to know if you've ever moderated a deliberative forum before, so we can get a sense of just how much of experience you have here. Wow, so I see most of you have not had the chance to do a forum, so that's great. We're delighted that you're willing to jump in here and become a moderator. So let's move on now to point 4. And this is about listening. You have, when you lead a forum, moderate a forum, you want to listen deeply and you want to practice listening deeply. I always say to people, get a good night's sleep. That can really help because you don't want to fall asleep, you don't want to drift. One of the people who trained me how to do moderation said that the better you are at doing your job, the more you are listening and the less you are guiding the discussion. In other words, get good at this and you don't have to do any work. All you have to do is listen. And what's really exciting is how rich the discussion generally is. So you're going to be encouraging the expression of different points of view. That means you need to listen deeply for those points of view and help participants understand each other and their different perspectives. Every once in a while, you may want to stop and summarize to make sure sort of you're all at the same place. And of course, as Patty mentioned, you want to manage the time so that you give equal time to each part of the forum. So point 5 is to ask powerful questions. So the kinds of questions you want to ask are why or why not. So when someone makes what seems to be an obvious and straightforward statement, sometimes it can be very helpful for the purposes of deliberation to ask them why or why not, or how. This is another question that can be very effective in pushing people to think more deeply. That's what you want to do, is keep pushing them to think more deeply. Now, the kinds of questions you probably want to stay away from are simple questions like who, what, where, and which. This is not, you're not playing a reporter, you're actually trying to get people to deliberate. They're less powerful in this circumstance. It helps if you consider good questions in advance so you come prepared, and most of the moderator guides give you a lot of those questions, and I'll go over some of them today. So one of the forums that ALA has been quite involved with is a forum on privacy. We're going to have a pre-conference so people can participate in this forum this summer. So just imagine if somebody gives you an example that the government needs to crack down on social networks and how they handle personally identifiable information. What kind of questions might you ask to get them to go beyond that? Well, the why question, why would you want them to do it? Or the how question, how should the government do that? And when you start to probe how, then people will say, oh yeah, you know, they start to realize it's not so simple. So point 6, lead with a probing question. When you begin the forum, you're going to go around the circle and ask participants to introduce themselves. You don't just want to know their name. You want to start off by asking them a question that's an icebreaker, like what concerns you most about this issue, or what brought you tonight or this afternoon to this forum. And what you'll find is people put a whole lot of information right out there at the beginning, and you open a lot of opportunities for further discussion just by asking that very simple question. So when you go further then, when you're about to consider approaches, you might ask, what is appealing about this option or approach, or what don't you like about it? What makes this approach a good one or a bad one? You're going to want to probe for pros, cons, trade-offs, consequences, and costs. So it's not just simple answers you're looking for. You really want to go below the surface. Point 7, ask about consequences and costs. So when people come up with a perfect solution, you might want to really probe and ask them, well, what would be the costs or consequences of doing what you're suggesting? So if the government were to take a stronger role in regulating social networks, what would the cost that be? What would the consequences be? So what would be an argument against the option you like best? Or is there a downside to this course of action? You know, lots of times we're so proud of the perfect solution we have, we don't think very hard about what's the downside. But when you really push people to do that, it really makes them think through the solution a lot more carefully. What would the cost be? Can anyone think of something constructive that might come from an option, even an option that doesn't seem very appealing to people? Point 8. Identify tensions. So what you're really trying to get at when you're moderating, particularly as you get further into the deliberation, is just what kinds of tensions are there between these or among the options? What's the gray areas? Where's the ambiguity? Why is this issue so difficult to decide? Now, last week, Patty talked about why you would do deliberation. We're only doing this kind of work on issues that are really what we call wicked problems. These are not simple solution problems. So, of course, there's going to be ambiguity and tension, and that's what you want to try to get at. So now in our packet on page 10 and various pages before that, we have a whole page of these little cartoon-like questions. Questions like, could you tell me a story to illustrate that? Or how might others see the issue? So we've got lots of help for you. You don't have to come up with any of this on your own. But when you read the manual, you'll start to see there's kinds of questions that you can probe with that you don't have to know a lot about the answers, but it's a way to neutrally get people to reveal more so you can get below the surface. Point 9, detect common ground. Now, the key purpose of a deliberative forum is to look for a shared sense of direction or common ground. So imagine if Congress had taken this approach with healthcare or immigration, if they started with where they agreed and then saw that as an opportunity for action, a lot more may have happened. So once you find some common ground, you've got to discover too, well, what trade-offs are we willing or unwilling to accept? Or what are we willing or unwilling to do as individuals or as a community in order to solve this problem? Indeed, people are going to have to make some choices and probably some sacrifices if they're really going to come together to solve the problem. And you want to determine if people are moving from what I call the I to we, which I'll talk a little bit more about in. So point 10 is handling moderator challenges. Now, on our first webinar, a number of people expressed concern about handling difficult participants. There are a number of ways you can ensure that no one dominates and everyone feels encouraged to participate and share their thoughts. We have a lot of those details in our manual, particularly on pages 13 to 15. But I assure you, once you get a little familiar with moderating, you will find that you are very capable of keeping people from dominating and being the experts that nobody else wants to challenge. You can keep them from talking too much, which usually means that others are talking too little. You can get those who talk too little to contribute, partially by turning to them and saying, gee, Jerry, I noticed that you haven't said something, but it looks like you have something you might want to contribute. And there's lots of other ways you can do that. There may or may not be difficult participants, but being ready in case there are will help you make it through the discussion without any problem. So questions like, what do others think about this? Or what ideas have not yet been expressed? Or how would you respond to the concerns just expressed by somebody can help you move away from the dominant person and let others speak. So in conclusion, let me tell you a few good signs. So you're doing real well if people are expressing a lot of different viewpoints, not everybody's agreeing. They're telling you what matters most to them. They acknowledge there's complexity. So often you'll hear people say, you know, I never realized this problem was so complex before, particularly when they hear other people in their community expressing different viewpoints that are very thoughtful and reasonable. The discussion is among the group members, not just between you and one or two people. And people are expressing emotion. You want them to be emotional. You just want to keep the discussion civil. So finally, when the talk moves from I to we, and let me just give you an example of what I mean there. A couple of years ago, the National Issues Forum had an issue book called Democracy's Challenge. And I led that discussion several times. In fact, we had a forum on Democracy's Challenge at ALA. And what we found is at the beginning of the discussion, people would talk about those people, like policymakers and the media, as the problem. Then they would start to talk further about themselves. I believe this, or I would like to see that. And finally, in a successful forum, they moved from I to we. They realized by the end that democracy's challenge is all of our challenges, that we must deal with this together. And if you can get to that point in a forum, you have really done a good job. So, I'm going to turn now to our next speaker, Ellen Knutson, who is with the Center for Civic Engagement at Northwestern University, but also she's a research associate with the Kettering Foundation, and she's coming to us today from the Kettering Foundation. Ellen?
Thanks, Nancy. As Nancy mentioned, I am talking to you today from Dayton, Ohio at the Kettering Foundation, although most days I would have been talking to you from Chicago. I'm going to talk a little bit about the role of the recorder. Not quite as complicated as a job as the moderator's job, but still a critical member of the deliberative process, and really an important aspect. First of all, there are several things that the recorder does during the forum. First, listening carefully and accurately, capturing the main ideas of what the participants are saying. And what are you listening for? Well, you're listening for those tensions, consequences, and trade-offs that Nancy had mentioned, and capturing that. And by capturing those things, the recorder really assists the moderator with the reflections at the end of the forum. So different points can be pointed back to actually, on pieces of paper stuck to walls. It's really a powerful thing for people to see their words put up. For the purpose of recording, I'm just going to say a few words about it. It is important, and it helps the group members stay on track. It helps keep the discussion flowing. It's a place where the moderator might be able to point to say, you know, we've covered that issue pretty well, that aspect pretty well. Look, there's several things up on the board. Can we push a little farther, a little deeper, move to another place? It also helps to create a memory, a group memory of what has transpired in the discussion. Importantly, it affirms the thoughts of each person, what they have said. When Nancy was talking a bit about the difficult participants, sometimes simply a participant seeing what they've said captured up, even if it feels off topic or feels like it might be taking the group in a different direction that the group doesn't want to go, you can, by capturing it and saying, no, we've heard you, is a very powerful thing. It helps to, again, similar to the idea of capturing the group memory, it helps to capture the wisdom and being able to start to see the themes and threads that are running through the conversation. And just a few thoughts here on why you were taking the notes, what might happen to the notes at the end of the forum. One, it may help the organizers plan for action. They can look back and say, oh, this is what was said, this is what we were thinking and deciding on. So this can help us with our next steps. For some groups, they decide that they want to write a summary report after the forum, and these notes then are very helpful for that. There are other things that, depending on the purpose of the forum or the role that these notes can be used for, but those are a few of the ideas. Like the moderator, there is preparation that the recorder needs to be thinking about before the forum. Perhaps most importantly is being familiar with the issue, being familiar with the issue book if that's being used or how the issue has been framed. The reason why this is important is you're listening for how participants are responding to those points, and it can help you out. Knowing the layout of the room, it seems simple and straightforward, but you want to be sure that you're taking your notes where the most people can see them, because this is part of supporting the dialogue. And so if people can't see the notes, it's not supporting the dialogue. Figuring out where you can post them, figuring out, you know, is it okay if you put tape on the walls, all of those kinds of things. Also thinking about what colors you're going to use. Perhaps yellow is not the best color for it to be seen, but you know, things like that. And deciding on ways that you can indicate the different trade-offs, the pros, the cons. And the picture that's on here, and you'll notice that this recorder is writing so fast she became a blur. But she's decided to have the pros on one side of the sheet, the cons on the other side, and then the trade-offs down at the bottom. Obviously, you can decide to do it another way. Some people decide to use different colors for pros and cons and trade-offs, but just ways that can be indicated is important. And then just a final few thoughts about what you're actually doing when you're recording. Again, it's not necessary to take a verbatim transcript of what's going on, but capturing the general tone and big ideas of the forum and what people are saying. One possible thing that you might do is to quote phrases, so you're actually using the words of the participants, and that's one way that you can help to be sure that you're not unintentionally altering the meaning of what people have said. It's also good to check in with the group every now and again to be sure that you're capturing what is being said. This can be done with your eyes and nods and smiles. Sometimes so you may feel like you need to actually verbally check in, especially if maybe you didn't hear what a person said or you just want to be sure that you've captured the essence. Obviously, writing the notes so they can be read, so writing largely, writing neatly, and then again, so that the notes are useful later on, that they're identified well with titles, with numbers. We know this is for approach 1, this is approach 2, etc. I mean, keep in mind that the role of the recorder is there to support the conversation. You're not there to be the center of attention, but being there to be sure that the conversation can move forward. And that's sort of recording in a nutshell. I'm going to now pass the microphone on to Betsy McBride. Betsy designs and supports civic engagement projects for various public agencies and other organizations. So with that, I'll hand it over to Betsy.
Hello from Boise, Idaho. So you've heard already today about the role of the moderator and the recorder. Another possible role can be that of the note taker. A note taker is not absolutely required to conduct a forum, but their added value is to provide notes for any after-forum analysis. Because you will be holding forums on topics of public importance, deeper learning will be valuable to you and others. The note taker watches for deeper meaning from the actual conversations, the group dynamics, and ideas or comments that particularly resonate with the group. You might not know in advance who may need to know more about what the community believes or what it says it needs more information about. If, for example, as a librarian, you hear folks say that they don't think they have enough information about the topic, you could use that information in your future library programming or even your book purchasing. It is also very helpful when you debrief about what worked and what didn't. In our work in Virginia Beach, we have sometimes discovered that one of our discussion questions we thought brilliant in advance just doesn't work. You may need to do a report of your forum, either for funding purposes or maybe organizational needs. If you have notes from a note taker, you will have extra depth and color for your report. And because the recorder is not capturing the conversation word for word, a note taker is more likely to hear and write down a wonderful quote. We have actually used these quotes, not ever for attribution, but to represent ideas and enthusiasm for the work. This listing is related to the subject of the forum. You can see that watching for items like these would help after the forum in a review of what happened and why. Were there ideas that weren't pursued? Information. And this second listing of potential items that a note taker might watch is related to process. So were there problems with the dialogue? Did you get hung up on a bad question? Did people seem to have a very good time? Those are things related to how the forum actually worked. So to review, a note taker is not a requirement, but their extra ears and notes can add important value. Like the moderator and the recorder, introduce the person, talk about their roles, and as a note taker, their role could be described as one more person listening deeply to the work of the group. So now, back to Nancy Chronic.
Thanks, Betsy, and thanks all of you. That was great. I know we've given you a lot to think about. So from today, we're going to move into our next session in a month, where we move from the thinking about how to do a forum to actually practicing next month. So this is what we'd like you to do. We're going to give you some homework. We're going to ask that you read the Success in School issue book and moderator guide. They are available on the National Issues Forum website. We are going to give you a link to them. There's a moderator guide with the issue book and a video so that you can get familiar with an actual issue book, and we're going to work from that issue book next time. One of the reasons we chose this particular issue because there's a downloadable video, a downloadable guide, and the actual issue book are free. Not all of them are free. So, and we also thought it would be a topic of great interest. You might also, while you're on the National Issues Forum site, take a look at some of the other issue guides that are there. And we have links in some of the other materials that we gave you last time that are available on our ALA Connect page to other places that have issue guides. Now, during webinar 3, we are actually going to walk you through a forum step by step, after which you will have lots of opportunity to practice at home with your colleagues and friends. So if you can bring a friend or a buddy with you, that would be great. So you both can work together. And then finally, on our last webinar in May, we're going to focus on how to convene these forums, covering topics like attracting a diverse audience, building partnerships, promoting your forum, setting up, etc. So we assume you have lots of questions. Some of those will get answered in the next 2 webinars, but we hope that you will also provide some questions today. So just a reminder, the first forum that we did back in February is available for archive. You can download it for free at any time. This forum that we're doing today will also be available for archive soon. You will get a notice when it's available. And then we will have 2 more forums, one in April and one in May, both of which you will need to register separately for. And then finally, at ALA this summer, we will actually be convening a forum on privacy where you will get to participate as well as learn more about how to moderate and convene. So finally, we hope you'll have questions. Here's contact information for all of us, as well as our ALA Connect page. But we look forward to hearing questions from any and all of you. So while I'm waiting to see if there are any questions, and we will encourage you to write them in chat, let me tell you a question that was asked previously. Somebody asked us, where can I go to watch a forum or observe a forum or participate in a forum? Now, Patty Deneen, who was our first presenter today, she maintains the National Issues Forum's website, and on that website, there's actually a list of forums. We will shortly also be posting on our ALA Connect site some videos of some forums that were held in State College, Pennsylvania, where I participated and led the local National Issues Forum group. So we will have some examples for you. We also encourage you to share with us share with Patty Deneen, as well as share with the Center for Civic Life when you are doing a forum, so we can point people to you as well. So let's see, is Tony Talon. Hey, Tony. Hi, so glad you joined us. Is there an ideal number of participants for a forum? Yes, there are an ideal number. Carolyn already typed it in. I usually like at least 8 people. I go up to 30. Carolyn says 2 to 20 or 20 is ideal. But what happens if a whole lot more people show up? When I was in State College, we had 150 people show up for the Energy Forum. We broke them into multiple groups, and we had trained lots of moderators and had lots of rooms. So we like to get a sense in advance about how many people will come, but that's never a good indicator, and we like to have people walk in. But in each group, anywhere from 8 to 10 to 20, 25, 30 is good. If you have too few people, you don't have enough different viewpoints. If you have too many people, people don't get enough time to talk. Okay, so Pat Smith wants to know, what was the question in Virginia Beach that you determined did not work at all? So I don't know if Betsy wants to answer that question. I'm going to give Betsy.
Sure. We had questions that occasionally had too much jargon in them. When you work with the content for a long time, you start to assume that people have background information that they don't necessarily have. So the questions when you do a forum are an interesting mix. There's sort of the is closely connected to the issue you're tackling, but then there are the follow-up questions, the one Nancy's pointed out. Well, what would other people think about that? What would be the cost? And so in some cases, when you're doing a local issue, you make up your own issue books and you have to think up your own discussion questions. And if you make them too technical, you sometimes find yourself faced with a group of people in the room that you believed would understand your question, but it just doesn't work.
Okay, so thanks, Betsy. We've got a great question that comes up a lot, is how do we get a diversity of opinion in the room? And this is a tough one and something we will definitely cover in our 4th forum. But I will tell you that this is a complex question, because we assume if everybody in the room thinks alike, that they're all going to respond the same way. So let me give you an example of when we thought that most people thought alike, and why deliberation is so interesting. So we did a training session at ALA several years ago over my favorite topic, filtering the internet. And that's when I think Carolyn first got involved, if I remember correctly. Anyway, most of the people in the room were people who did not believe in using filters in libraries. But as soon as we peeled back just a little bit, we found that people came to that conclusion for totally different reasons, and they didn't agree on anything below the surface. So even when people do agree, that doesn't mean they're going to take the same position, or that they came to that position for the same reason. And therefore, it may complicate how you solve the problem. So that's always interesting to note, that people are not quite as monolithic in their views of the world usually. So now we're going to talk to you more in the 4th session about how to attract people from different walks of life. Now that doesn't mean you're going to, it's not like a sample where you're going to make sure you have somebody from each viewpoint. But the more you reach out to groups in your community that you never thought about before, the more interesting the discussion. So for example, when I was in State College and we ran a forum on energy, we had the usual suspects of professors and their classes from the university that were dealing with energy. But we also found somebody who worked at a nuclear power plant. And we found a guy who ran a recombinant bike shop. And that made it much more interesting. And we certainly got some variety there and people that weren't the usual suspects. So one of the really fun parts about doing these forums and planning them is to think, who might come to the table that you never thought about before? And it's a great way to get people who never come to the library into the library as well, and get them into a conversation and perhaps open up new opportunities. So let's see now. Any other questions? Carolyn talked about personal invitations, absolutely. And if you have a committee that is actually doing the planning that represents different groups in the community, get them to extend those personal invitations. So you are not the only one doing the inviting. The more you extend your reach by a diversity of groups being involved, the more hopefully they will extend their reach. And as Carolyn says, it's wonderful for demonstrating that libraries are truly neutral ground. So Debbie suggests that use a variety of communication tools, including inviting people through the public school community. And we're going to be using a school-related topic next time. So we will think about a lot about schools. So Betsy asked the question, what about co-moderators? Let's see. And Carolyn says, or the recorder and moderator can trade roles. Well, as I can suggest from my own perspective, is that when people are new at this, I think it really helps them to trade off. One person do, say, approach one, while the other one does the recording, and then they switch places. That way it reduces their tension, and they get to observe another person and share the load. And if you're not that familiar with doing this the first time, it really helps to have that break. And it's fun then too, so you're not doing all the same. So it really depends on what you're comfortable with and what others are. I don't know if Betsy or Carolyn wants to add in here. So not hearing somebody on the mic. Robbins also asked, how long are these sessions? As Patty mentioned, they're often 2 hours. That's traditional. They can be much longer. They can be shorter if you're doing multiples. So if you're doing, say, approach one night and approach 2 and 3 on another night, or different ways to break it up, it may be less than 2 hours for each session. Debbie suggests time for coffee and snack, and Carolyn, I'm sure, will join in and say that food always helps. She also mentioned that she did a 1 hour on privacy this morning, but she said it wasn't long enough. You want people to be able to really engage, and the thing I find, it takes them a while to warm up. So, you can be fast, but if it's too fast, you're gonna really not get the depth you want. If it's too long, I think people really start to wander. So not seeing any more questions. Angela, I'm going to turn it back to you. Thank you all so much. We really enjoyed having you join us, and we look forward to continuing the conversation next time, where we actually get into the throes of a real forum.
Thank you, Nancy, and thank you so much to all of our speakers today, and thank you to all of you for taking time out of your busy afternoon to join us. We really appreciate it. Just so you know, you will be receiving a follow-up email from today's session. It will have a link to a survey. We would love to get your feedback on today's session, which will help shape the next 2 sessions in this series and also future online learning sessions from programminglibrarian.org. So please be sure to fill that out. Thank you once again to Patty, Nancy, Ellen, and Betsy, and everyone at the ALA Center for Civic Life. And thank you to you all for joining us. Please remember to sign up for Part 2 of Moderating Forums at your library, which will be held on April 24th at the same time as today's session. That's 4 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Central, 2 p.m. Mountain, and 1 West Coast time. So thank you very much.